Hi. There we go. Hi, everybody. Hi, thank you so much for joining me. I see somebody else from New Jersey. I'm also in New Jersey. For those of you I haven't met, welcome. Early Valentine's Day class today. But my name is Katie. I'm a pastry chef and a creative educator here with Michaels, and I love joining you guys every week, pretty much. Pretty much always on Thursdays for baking class. And today we're doing something really fun, which is Valentine's Day cookie cakes. And Kana was saying before class, she's like, I've never had a cookie cake before. And they're really fun. You may have seen them. They were like very trendy for a minute. If you ever saw like stacked up sheets of cookies with piped buttercream in between, that's essentially what we're making today, but on a mini scale. So I'll just grab one to show you. So we're kind of making like these cute little rounds. You can see like little round cookies with little heart cutouts. We're going to stack them up. So they're going to be very like layer cake style, but in cookie form. So if you're not a big cake fan, this is going to be perfect for you. And it's really simple, really easy to make, really fun, and just super cute for Valentine's Day or really year round. You can kind of make these however you like, in any shapes that you like. So it should be a really fun thing to do. So if you are joining me and you're baking along, feel free to come down. I'm going to show you what I'm working with, and maybe at some point, Kana will throw the recipe up in the chat so you guys can have that as well. But you can see I'm really working with pantry staples today, really nothing out of the ordinary. I've got butter, and you notice I've got like lots of butter, and that's because we're going to be making the cookies, which is a standard sugar cookie, and then also a buttercream, an American style buttercream. So I've got two batches of butter going on. Both unsalted. You can use salted as well. Just cut down on the additional salt that we would add in the recipe. And then for the rest of my cookie dough over here, I've got granulated sugar, all-purpose flour, again, like very basic stuff, one egg. I'm using vanilla bean paste, which is like my favorite thing. I feel like I talk about every time. But you can use vanilla extract as well, or really any other flavorings that you like. You can kind of flavor these in any direction that you choose. And then I've got a little salt and a little baking powder just to kind of give our cookies just a slight lift. We don't want spread. We don't want to change the shape of what we're cutting out, but just a little bit to kind of tenderize it and make that mouth feel really buttery and tender. I've got a rolling pin to roll out my dough. I did mention we're using cutters, so this could be really anything you like. I did happen to have a fluted cutter. This is about a 4-inch size. You can go bigger, you can go smaller. If you have a heart cut out for the middle, I thought that was super cute for Valentine's Day, but you can also just use a shot glass in the middle if you want to do a round, or you could really free form it with a small paring knife. You could do that as well. And then for my buttercream, I've got unsalted butter. And again, this is room temperature butter, which we sort of all talked about how cold it is right now. So my room temperature is a little on the colder side. It's probably about 60 degrees or so, versus I typically would want it about 65 to 70 degrees, so a little bit warmer. So we might have to beat it up a little bit extra in our mixer to get it there. I've also got a little bit of milk just to kind of get the consistency of the buttercream that I want, some salt, powdered sugar, American style buttercream. I know it's freezing. You're freezing too. And then I've got, just to kind of change up the flavors a little bit if you want, I do have some instant espresso powder. So I might do like a mocha situation with some of the buttercream today if I'm in that mood. And then in terms of fun stuff, I did pick up at Michael's, I grabbed some like fun Valentine's Day things. So they were like these sweet tooth fairy icing decorations I thought were really cute. Some heart sprinkles. I've got some gold leaf over there. Really anything that you have that would fit this sort of theme would be great as well. All right, so we're going to dive in. So I'm working with my stand mixer. So I'm going to go ahead and get my semi-room temperature butter into my mixer. And we are going to start with the cookie dough first. So I'm going to get all this buttercream stuff out of the way for now. And as we go along, feel free to be active in the chat. Definitely let me know how you're liking what we're doing. If you have questions along the way, all of that is great. All right. So we've got our sort of soft butter. So I'm going to pop this into my mixer. So let's open this up. And I'm actually going to cut it up just a bit, just to give it a bit of a head start here. It is on the cooler side. And now when you're making cookies versus making cakes, a lot of the time when we're creaming butter for cakes, we're really beating that butter until it's really light and fluffy. And that sort of aerates our cake batter a bit. In the case of cookies, this sort of becomes less important. And in fact, I kind of want to do that a little bit less because I don't want as much spread in my cookies as they bake in the oven. So all I'm going to do is just bring these two together, my butter and my sugar, just until they combine really. And my butter sort of like evens out a bit. And then as soon as it does that, I'm going to get in my egg and my vanilla. Your egg can be at room temperature if you want. That can kind of make the mix even more smooth. Lobbing in a little vanilla. Oh, I just love the way that smells. It's so yummy. Get my egg into my little container here. And you can see my butter and sugar already are sort of coming together. Again, my butter is a little cold, so I'm going to give it like an extra few seconds. But as soon as I see that all of it is mixed nicely with my sugar, I'm just going to go ahead and lob in my. So I'll let that mix for a few seconds. And if you've been in classes before, you may recognize this recipe. It's the same cookie dough that I used for the leaf cookies back around Thanksgiving time. So this is like a really versatile cookie dough recipe that I just love having on hand. It's like a great sugar cookie. It doesn't spread too much. It's nice and buttery and tender. Get that excess butter in there. And it comes together so fast. So I do want to go ahead and just scrape down my bowl a bit. You can see again that butter is on the cooler side. So I've got like a couple of chunks kind of running around. So we want to beat those up a bit. But don't worry too much about this. A stiff cookie dough, it always sort of comes together. Give it another couple seconds. All right. And now we can get all our dry stuff in. So I've got all-purpose flour, my salt, and my baking powder. And you can whisk those together first if you want. I'm a bit of a lazy baker sometimes, so I don't always do that. But just beat it until it combines. All right, and that's it. So you can see I didn't overwork it. If I kept beating, even if you see some stuff running around your bowl and you're like, oh, I got to get all that in. You never want to overwork a cookie dough. As soon as those dry ingredients go in, the more you work any sort of flour, you're going to create gluten, which of course sort of creates more of a rubbery cookie rather than like a really buttery, tender one. So just bringing it together is key to keeping it really nice and soft. All right, but I will go ahead and scrape in anything that I feel was left behind and just bring it to the middle. And now at this point, if you want to, you can chill this dough. You can just shape it into a disc and wrap it in plastic wrap and then go ahead and chill for about 30 minutes or so, just to help that butter sort of like stiffen up a little bit and make rolling a little bit easier. Of course, because we're in class today, we're not going to do that. We're just going to dive right in. I'm going to get my mixer over here and get a little bit of parchment paper. Now this dough is on the stiffer side, so I could roll this right on my cutting board, just a floured surface. But even easier, I find, is just to roll between parchment paper. And that sort of makes the whole process just happen a little bit easier and quicker, a little less sticking. So my cookie dough comes right out. Scrape out all those bits. You want every bit. And this is going to make about, depending on the size of the cookie cakes, I'm stacking 3 per cake. So it's going to make about 3 stacks. But if you go larger, if you go smaller, you can make really one big one if you want to. That would be fun also. Just give this a little bit of a rinse. Going to need that in a minute. Okay. Here. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and roll. So to do that, I'm just going to give it a bit of a press. Another sheet of parchment right on top. And again, this is totally optional. You could just roll right on your surface. A little bit of a floured surface. It's kind of fun to roll between parchment paper. There's something very satisfying about like how clean it is. You know, if you've ever floured your surface and then there's flour on the floor, and she said something about rolling in parchment, it's just like, ah, well, that's nice. And this does work really well for pie dough also. You can see I'm not really like going too fast. I'm just sort of pushing it out from the center. I'm not worried too much about the shape because I'm cutting using my cutters. But I am sort of making sure that it stays really nice and even as I go. And I'm looking for about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch thickness. So I'm at like a little over 1/4 of an inch. Is it best to chill before rolling or after rolling? Actually, funny enough, I would say both, depending on what your prerogative is. And you could see some of that cold butter running around. Don't worry too much about that. That's going to be fine. I would say if you chill before you roll and you're rolling just directly on your surface, that's going to make it really easy to roll because the butter is going to stiffen up a little bit. And if you chill after rolling, if you roll the way I'm doing it between parchment, and you give it a chill after you roll, that makes it really easy to kind of pick up and move your shapes around. So depending on how much time you have, you could always chill your dough really at any stage. Sometimes it's necessary and sometimes not as much, especially in these cooler temperatures. Everything sort of becomes a little bit more workable. I'm just gently moving it around, and you saw I did sort of unstick it from my parchment a little bit. Let's check where we're at. Pretty much there. So I'm just going to sort of even out that surface because again, I didn't chill before I rolled. So I do have like a little bit of stickiness going on. So what I'm going to do is kind of just even it out just a bit. And now's when we're going to use our cutters. I've got a couple of thick spots. If you run your hand over, it should feel nice and even. All right. So if you're very brave, yeah, so 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch is ideal for this. And we are going to use the scraps as well. So I'm rolling this once, and then all the scraps that I have left, I'm going to sort of roll them again. All right. So you can see based on the size, I'm going to get a good amount. You always want to go as close together as possible when you're cutting. The least scraps, the better. Because of course, the more you re-roll a dough, sort of the less tender it becomes. So get as many as you can. And I'm actually going to wait to cut out the centers until I transfer them to my baking sheet. This way they sort of keep their shape a little bit better. I was so close. Did you see? I was so close. I could just get that last one. It was just a little tight. That would have been so satisfying if I could just cut one right out of that. All right, so let's see how many we got. So we got 1, 2, 4, 6, 7. So I'm already at 7. And of course, I'm going to have those centers to work with also. So get a little bit more out of it. I've got my baking sheet. I've got sort of like a nice cookie spatula. And at this point, you could just pick them up and just transfer them right over. And I'm going to space these out probably at least about a 1/2 inch or so, but they're really not going to, they're not going to spread too much, just a little bit. You should be able to get at least 6 on a baking sheet. And if you went smaller in size, you may even get more. And at this point, you could just come back. You can even take a pastry brush and just brush off any of that flour so that doesn't bake up with your cookies. And then I could just go ahead and cut out my centers. So cute. And actually, if you like these, you can even just bake some hearts along with it if you've got some extra dough. My daughter would really like the hearts, so I'll give her the hearts. Even do little mini hearts, use them as garnish. And then we're just going to re-roll the scraps. So to re-roll scraps, whenever you're re-rolling, it's important not to overwork your scraps. The same way we didn't overwork the dough the first time. And I am going to save these because they're cute. But instead of coming in and like kneading all my scraps, totally unnecessary, all we're going to do is just kind of roll them just as is. And why do you keep flipping the dough while you're rolling it? Well, I would say mostly if you're rolling between parchment paper, I keep flipping just to kind of unstick it from the parchment. If you're rolling on a surface, I tend to flip less if it's on a surface. Obviously, that would be a lot harder to manage. So at that point, it's fun. Sometimes if you're just rolling a big sheet of dough, I do like to sort of roll it up like this a bit and flour underneath as I need to, and then sort of like lay it back down again, because you never want your dough to be sticking to your surface, especially for really delicate shapes like these. You just want to always make sure that it's unstuck. You could see a little bit of mine was already sticking. Come in and flour, lay it back down again. And then I should always be able to sort of scoot it around just like this. And that goes with pie dough also. If you can't move it at any point, that's usually a bad sign. You should always be able to kind of scoot it around. You can see I didn't overwork my scraps. I didn't knead them together. They just sort of came together naturally. And you could always kind of like check yourself. What can I get out of this? If I'm looking for 3 stacks, I already have 6, 7, 8. I really only need 1 more. So at that point, I could use the rest for hearts or really anything else that I prefer. Just sneak a heart out of it. And then we're pretty good to go. So at this point, I'm going to bake these. So you can chill them if you want to at this point. If you want to reduce the spread even more, sometimes chilling for about 10 minutes or so, it'll really stop them from spreading in the oven. The heat sort of like cements them in place. But if not, you could just pop them in. Your oven should be preheated to 350 degrees. Someone double check me on that. I think I put 350 in the recipe, or I put 375, one of the two. But they're very quick. They're about 8 minutes or so, just until they get very lightly golden around the edges. And I have some that are already baked, so I'm going to show you what those look like. Let me set these aside for now. Hold that thought. And these really are like, they're such a just like a very pleasant cookie. They're just very buttery, very tender, not too sweet. Thank you so much. 350. Karen called it. There we go. But a very delicious cookie. And I use this for Christmas cookies also. So it's a good recipe to kind of have on hand. All right, so let's wipe this up. We're going to grab the ones that are baked. All right. So my baked cookies, I kind of stacked them all on one here. But you could see not much spread. You could see like the before size and the after size, pretty much the same. Just very lightly golden right around the edge. So nothing too dark, because you do want them to be really light and really delicate. Please repeat what you said about preventing spreading. Yeah, so if your cookies really spread, one of the biggest reasons cookies spread a lot is the thickness. If your cookie is really on the thicker side, it is going to spread a lot more. Naturally, a thinner cookie will spread less. So that 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch is really important, just to make sure they really hold their shape. But if you do find that your cookies spread a lot, a good way to sort of just like prevent that a little bit is to just freeze them a bit or refrigerate them a bit before you bake. And that'll really help keep them in place a little bit there. But I would say most of the time, the thickness is the reason. Also, just check your recipe. If it's a recipe that has maybe a lot of leavening agents in it, like a lot of baking powder, of course, that causes spread as well. So a recipe like this one, with just a 1/4 teaspoon baking powder will really kind of limit that as well. All right, so we're going to jump into buttercream. So I'm going to put this aside a little bit here. And I am going to wash out my bowl. So forgive me for a few seconds. I'm going to just rinse it out really quickly. All right. The butter is just melting away. There we go. All right, we're going to dry out our bowl really well. And maybe that heat from the warm water help warm up that butter a little bit. That would be helpful too. All right, so American style buttercream. So the easiest style of buttercream, but for these cookies, you can really use anything you like. So if you prefer like a Swiss meringue buttercream, or even a French buttercream would be really beautiful for this with all those egg yolks in it. That would be really fun as well. But for a classic, we've got American style. So American style buttercream, just butter, powdered sugar, a little milk or cream, and then any sort of flavorings that you love. And maybe part of this I'll leave vanilla and part of it I'm gonna maybe espresso it up. All I'm gonna do is start by just beating up my butter, just to kind of get it going. And while my butter is beating up, I am gonna add my vanilla, or if you're adding any sort of flavoring, that sort of carries flavor, so it's nice to add it early. Just gonna lob some of that in there. My butter is definitely on the colder side, so I really want to beat it up nicely. Perfect. This series it's pretty fluffy, and you could also go a little bit longer. To beat butter and sugar is the first step, not as much as you would when making cake that helps with spreading. Yeah, totally. Thank you so much, Deb. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, limit your whip on your butter. That's always a good one too. It's funny how incorporating that air in the beginning, which is so important. You could see even in making buttercream, ideally, if I wasn't in class, I really would beat this for at least a few minutes really to aerate it. It doesn't only kind of like aerate things and make them lighter and fluffier, but it also builds the volume. So you end up with more buttercream than you would if you didn't thoroughly beat your butter. And the same is true for cake batter. You sort of incorporate air early on in the beginning, and it really lightens the crumb really nicely. But for something like cookies, when you want to reduce the spread, or even create a gooier chocolate chip cookie versus a cakier one, it's important not to beat your butter and sugar too much because that sort of aerates the mix and causes the opposite result. So that is a good point as well, definitely. All right. So once my butter is fluffy, which again, you could go further, on the fluffiness factor if you want to. I'm going to add about half my powdered sugar just to sort of avoid too much of a mess. And at this point, if your mixer is small, like I'm using my small mixer today, my 5-quart, you could also just take like a tea towel or even plastic wrap and just kind of cover your surface as you do this, and that'll help prevent a little bit of that confectioner's sugar from popping out of your bowl. We're going to do it bit by bit here. Can you use freeze-dried strawberries and buttercream to flavor it? Absolutely, yeah. No, I love that. And I actually love using like really finely ground freeze-dried fruit. It's such a great way to color and flavor so many different baking recipes because you're not adding that liquid factor. So absolutely. Now keep in mind, you're gonna have to balance. You're sort of adding additional dry ingredients. If you use something like a spice or freeze-dried berry or something like that, you're increasing the dry ingredients. So you're going to balance that maybe by needing a little bit extra milk or cream, or in the case of a berry frosting, even a little bit of lemon juice just to kind of brighten it and add a little bit of that extra fruity flavor would be nice as well. All right, so I'm just going to add a little bit of my milk just to sort of moisten things and sort of repeat the process. I'm going to beat in the milk and then add the rest of my powdered sugar. But yeah, I love that, Karen. That's delicious. That works really well for macaroons too. If you saw the macaroon class, you could definitely do that with macaroon shells also, which is so nice. I like using, I use ones. I don't remember if it was beet powder, but it made like a really fuchsia color and it was so pretty. A little bit of salt going in. The rest of my milk. And the thing about milk or cream, depending on the temperature of your butter, when you're making buttercream, you may need less. In a warmer day, you're going to get more moisture off of that warmer butter. On a colder day like this, I might need a little bit more to kind of balance that, firmness of the butter. So you can always add more milk, but you can't take it away. So it's always good to start with whatever the recipe calls for. And then you could always adjust as needed. See, mine is on the thicker side. So I'm going to grab one more splash of milk before I start overworking that mixer. This is just whole milk. But again, any liquid will do. Even if you want to make like a fun boozy buttercream for like a Valentine's Day, you could add a little bit of Kahlua or Bailey's. That'd be fun too. If you feel your mixer and you hear your mixer working, that's usually a sign it's a little bit on the stiffer side. Right, we're looking good. So at this point, I'm just going to beat it till it's fluffy. And before I go too far, I could just give it a taste and just see if it needs any extra salt. It is a little thick still, a little bit more milk. That's nice. Okay. All right. So let's check out what we've got. You can see what I've got here. So it's thick, but it's sort of spreadable and nice. I'm going to be able to pipe it really nicely. It's going to hold its shape. You could really beat this up. We talked about aerating your buttercream, increasing the volume. At this stage, you could continue to beat this for a few more minutes just to like really build it up. And I am going to leave some in the bowl because I'm going to turn some mocha. But I'm going to take a little bit just to have its vanilla first. But you can definitely keep going on that mix if you want to. Now to fill up my piping bags, so I've got two piping bags. So I've got one for vanilla, one for mocha. I'm going to start by just folding down the top of my bag just to keep it really nice and clean. And I've got sort of like a medium round tip, but you could use a star tip for this as well. I'm going to trim off the top. And just push it up just so it's clearing the top here. I don't want to go too far down, especially with a stiff buttercream. I want to make sure that I don't accidentally pop that tip out by accident. I'm going to take a little bit and then we'll leave about half. Hold up my top again and just sort of push it down. And the warmth of my hands, ideally, as I work, is going to kind of warm this up a little bit because it is cold in here. I went to turn on my car this morning and it was like all of the tires are low. Everything was like, it's so cold. Our driveway is just ice. It's crazy. All right, so for my mocha, so I've got instant espresso powder. You could also add a little cocoa powder, which I did. I threw a little cocoa in there. And I do love using, if I'm at the supermarket choosing a cocoa powder, I do like using like a special dark because that's going to give you kind of the richest flavor and color with the least amount of cocoa powder. And we talked about adding extra dry ingredients. So of course, what do I have to add now to balance, now that I've added all this dry stuff? A little bit more milk. So that could be anything you like. I'm going to stick with the milk, but it could also be, you know, any sort of booze or any sort of liquid. You could add, you know, fresh espresso instead of the instant espresso, but keep in mind then you're sort of adding liquid ingredients. So you might have to balance that with a little more powdered sugar. So it's always about that wet-dry balance. Move this up a little bit. Let's check out what we've got. Let's give it a try. I'm complaining because it's cold and out in California. Oh my gosh. And I'm so sorry you're in California. I hope you are. What a crazy time over there. Everyone, you know, it's safe. All right. So we've got a very lovely mocha. I'm going to load that up as well. It's got just like a little chocolate flavor, but like a really nice kick of espresso powder, which is lovely. You could add a little cardamom with that, would be nice. And just to help me out, I'm going to grab a drinking glass, pop in it just to hold it for me. And to garnish this one, I have a little bit of Nutella in a piping bag, just for like a little extra indulgence. Okay. Lovely. All right, let's get piping. Close this up. Mush her down. And it's helpful to kind of squeeze halfway down, just to have a little bit more control. I've never piped a thing. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You have piping bags, Erica? I hope you do. Piping is so fun. And this is actually a really good thing to pipe because buttercream is very forgiving. Now to set these up, I've got some plates. You could use cake boards also. Oh, perfect. Oh, I'm so glad. So if you have small cake boards, that would work for this. Also, you could also do these on like one big platter, would be fun too. But I just grabbed some small plates just to kind of set myself up. And I do want to glue them down. So let's say we're going to do two of the mochas probably. I'm just going to take a little bit of buttercream just on the bottom, just to kind of set it in place. And be careful when you press these down because these cookies are so delicate. You don't want to accidentally like snap one of them. And if you are still making these, if you're going to be making these, it's always good to make one extra round just in case. That's always a good idea. All right. Just a little bit of glue. You could also add like fresh raspberries in with this, would be nice. So let's set this up. So Kana, I'm going to bring the third one just in case that's helpful. Although it may not be low enough now that I'm looking at it. Let's see what we can do here. Can I flip this closer? Oh, I can. There we go. All right, so maybe that'll be helpful later, a different angle. And so all I'm going to do is pipe dots. So let's start with the mocha because that one's fun. So I'm going to come in and all I'm going to do is kind of do dots, little kisses, sort of all over. I'll put it where you can see, hopefully. So all I'm doing is kind of lifting, giving it like a little bit of height, and then just sort of releasing at the end. It's really hard to do this and hold it up at the same time. Kana, would you mind switching? Come over to the other camera if you can, the third one. Going in the meantime. So all I'm doing is making dots, going all the way around. I'm just sort of lifting off of the cookie and letting it sort of fall as I go. So you can see I'm sort of like lifting up and just piping these little dots to give it some height. So these are pretty high, little kisses. And I am going to fill in these other areas as well. You can see because of the heart shape, give like a little extra room. This is very French style, like when I worked in a French bakery. You see a lot of these sort of pipe dots going on. Right. Filling that one. Now that you've got it all covered, I'm just going to pop on the next layer. Give it a little bit of a press, not too hard, because of course as you pipe, it's going to continue to press a bit, but it's just adhering to the top. And what's nice about these is right now these cookies are like really nice and crunchy because they're sort of just baked, so they're like a flaky cookie. But as they sit with the buttercream, they sort of tenderize a little bit. So it almost becomes like a cake that you could sort of cut into. All the way around. And then fill in those extra spaces. And the beauty of buttercream, for those who are maybe a little bit newer to piping, you can pipe just as a test. You could just pipe onto parchment paper or just your surface first, just to sort of practice your dots. And then just scrape it up, put it right back into your bag, and then pipe on the real deal. That way you don't have to worry about sort of like marring your cookie while you're practicing. And this does make it pretty tall, but it's so cute, you know, but it's a little bit on the taller side. So it's totally up to you. Now to decorate it, here's where we could sort of pull out our sprinkles and things like that. You could do more dots on the top. I've got all this fun stuff. I did mention I've got Nutella in a bag. That's kind of fun too. And depending on what you like. So for example, I could keep it really simple and do like a couple of dots. Maybe take one of these, do like a little decorative something. I've got some of these hearts. I could do some extra. I got some little sprinkles. A little bit of those. I do kind of like the little dots going around. And do some more of those. Sprinkle action. At this point, I could take some of my Nutella if I want to. See, it's looking kind of fun already. Maybe test this drizzle, see where I'm at. Yeah, that's pretty good. Give it a little bit more of that chocolate effect. You could do a little bit of powdered sugar. A little snow. We got this very cute cookie. We could also do the vanilla. Let's do one of those. And you could do one layer chocolate, one layer. Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you. That's nice. Now this vanilla is very stiff, so I'm going to try to be delicate with it. All the way around. Bring it a bit closer. Ooh. There we go. It'd be nice to sort of layer in like fresh raspberries around, standing up. Be almost like a millefeuille, if you've had like a Napoleon or like a millefeuille, and you see like the fresh raspberries. It's a nice touch. Hey, you. Hey, you. It's so cold. You know it's cold if your buttercream is not sticking to your cookie. That's when you know it's cold. There we go. Just needs the warmth of my hands a little bit. Okay. It's kind of fun, just like that. Oh, I have something cute. Hold on. I do have these tiny strawberries. I forgot I had these. I have the smallest little strawberries you ever saw. Let's do some of those. Let's do a little ring going around. Hey, you. Now for little tiny strawberries, sometimes it's cute just to have. That makes like a really pretty, just like that. Or of course you could fan by just sort of slicing, not all the way through, but mostly just bit by bit. And once you've cut through, you can kind of fan it out. Just like that. That's kind of cute also. Could do one of those. I'm gonna save that for that one. Same deal, you could do some hearts. And you could really make these, like take them in sort of like a kid-friendly direction, or do really more of like an adult if you're having like a dinner party or a romantic dinner. That would be fun too. That's really cute and simple. Maybe we'll add a little bit of our gold leaf, which is so fun. If you don't have a tiny packet of gold leaf on hand, you should, because they're just, you never know when you're going to need some edible gold leaf. Do you use the same frosting for your Christmas cookies? So if I'm doing like a buttercream decoration, like if I was doing a tree and I wanted to sort of swipe on, different shades of green and do like a thicker design, I would use an American style buttercream. But most of the time I'm using royal icing for Christmas cookies. But totally depends on like the look that you want. It is kind of fun to use buttercream for Christmas cookies. Look how fun this is. If you haven't used gold leaf before, it's so much fun and it makes you feel so fancy. The little gold leaf. They're fun. All right, last one. Let's do a duo. This will be like the love mix. We'll do half mocha, half vanilla. I think I only have enough vanilla for the top, so I'm only gonna do half white, half mocha on the top of it. When I first started piping, it was helpful, especially if I was piping macaroons for some reason. It can really calm you if you count while you do it. It just sort of like settles your brain. So if you're having trouble with piping and you're getting uneven shapes, sometimes if you just slowly count as you pipe, it could be helpful. Where do you buy the edible gold leaf? Oh, thanks. The edible gold leaf, quite honestly, I bought this one on Amazon. But I'm sure specialty stores have it as well. Funny enough, I don't know if Michael's has. I know there's edible luster dust, but I don't know if there's gold leaf. That's a good thing to look up. I gotta look that up. This one's fun, like a black and white. Gonna use that fanned out strawberry from before. And one of these. And we'll just do a halvesy. And I can add some sprinkles. I'll just do a very subtle. I'm gonna do white on the mocha side, red on the not mocha side. So cute. Maybe because we did one side mocha, we'll just do this just on this side. So fun. Get rid of my buttercream labs that I have over here. All right. That is it. That is all we got. What do you think? That'd be so fun. How long do sprinkles keep? Oh, sprinkles. Well, pretty much forever. Sprinkles keep so long. I would say sprinkles, I'm sure on some of the packs there's expiration dates. Let's see. But quite honestly, I would say like forever. Not to overstate it. I'm sure they don't last forever, but you know, at least a year or two, they should be fine. I've definitely had sprinkles. I just picked these up, so they're brand new, but I've definitely had sprinkles, like Christmas sprinkles that I've used for several years. As long as you really store them nicely, make sure they're really nice and tight. You know, in a special, I have like a special sprinkle box. It's like an airtight box that I keep them in. But yeah, definitely, as long as they're in a cool, dry place, you should have no problems at all. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much, Erica. I'm so glad you joined us. I'm glad to have you. How to store leftover buttercream? Yeah, great question. I would say buttercream great in the fridge up to, typically I would say up to a week for an American style buttercream. You can freeze it as well if you want to, and it'll last like a couple of months. Just thaw it overnight in the refrigerator, then bring it to room temperature before you want to use it again. And these cookies actually you can also freeze really nicely, especially if you have leftover like heart shapes or anything like that that you want to keep. Just pop them in an airtight, like a freezer safe container. Pop them in the freezer a couple months. They'll be totally fine. You could just pull them out and enjoy them whenever you feel like a snack. But thank you so much for joining me, guys. We've got a really nice class next week. It's a very special class, probably the fanciest class we've done. It's a heart-shaped chocolate. Is it? Oh, wait, what's next week? Yeah, it's a heart-shaped chocolate box with truffles inside. So definitely come back for that. That's a really fancy one. It'd be difficult to cut in. Oh, yeah. Oh, and let me cut one for you so you could see. But yeah, it is sad to cut in because they are tasty. I'm going to cut into this one. But you can kind of cut right through, which is kind of amazing. And especially after they sit. Like I would say right now, they're so fresh. But as they sit with the buttercream, they sort of soften up a little bit. And then you can kind of serve them and people can cut them up and things like that. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm so glad. I hope to see you next week. Happy Valentine's Day, very early. Stay warm. Thank you so much.